Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David L., and I'm the author of You Are Gods. It's available at Amazon.com. The easiest way to find it is to do an author search under my name, David. My last name is spelled E-H-L. Buy your copy of You Are Gods today at Amazon.com. It's available in both hard copy as well as a digital format. So get your copy today. In today's video, let's talk a little bit about hell. In our last video, we talked about God and that the life review that is described in near-death experiences, and that the only person who will ever judge us is or judge our life is the person who lived the life, us. When I die, I'll judge my life. When you die, you'll judge your life, but no one else will ever judge you. And when I read that in the near-death experiences and saw Jesus' teaching, Jesus actually said the Father judges no one, but has given all judgment to the Son. And then later he goes on to describe, I judge no one. So it became very clear that the Son, the only way to translate the Son that made any sense was not as Jesus, but as the child at large, that all of us, in Psalm 82:6, I, the Most High God, say that all of you are gods and also my own children. It makes it very, very clear we are all God's children. So anytime you see the Son in the Bible, especially when Jesus is talking about it, he's actually referring to all of us. We're all as children of God. So the only person who will ever judge you is God. So where did this idea of being sent to hell come from? I began to wonder about that when I started reading all these near-death experiences, because I saw some descriptions about somewhere in the neighborhood of about 15 to 18% of near-death experiences that have been written down and recorded tend to be of the negative variety. But there's some interesting things about those where they can be rather hellish, but the key term is hellish. In most fundamentalist churches and teachings on the concept of hell, they will tell you that damnation to hell is eternal, that it is always and forever. Once sent to hell, that's it, you're toast, you're done, you're cooked. But is that really true? And the near-death experiences were the eye-opener for me. If God doesn't send anyone to hell, if God doesn't judge the life that was lived, why would he send somebody to hell? If we're all a part of God, as the near-death experiences describe, if God is absolutely everything, if there's nothing that exists that's not God, why would God send a part of himself, and I use the term him just for convenience sake, God's neither male nor female, but if God is God and we're all a part of God, why would God punish a part of himself? That just doesn't make any sense. In fact, I had this spontaneous spiritual experience one day in which a friend of mine was telling me that everybody that didn't believe the way that people believed at his church, they were all going to hell. And I heard this deep voice deep from within me say, God is not that psychotic. It just doesn't make any sense. Well, it turns out that hell was inserted into the teachings of the Bible by the Romans. There's actually a quote from St. Augustine where he says, when they're discussing, he says that he knows that the vast majority of tender-hearted Christians do not believe it is so, but God's justice demands it. Well, here is St. Augustine speaking centuries after Jesus, and he says that the vast majority of Christians don't believe in hell. Well, why is that? Seems to me that based on that statement, that the early church, the people who had actually heard the teachings of Jesus, didn't believe in hell. Well, hell is actually a pagan concept. Hell comes out of Manichaeism, and St. Augustine was a follower of the prophet Mani in his early life. It was one of the largest religions in the empire, the Roman Empire at the time. And it talked a lot about this creator God and a destructive God. It was almost yin and yang. That you had this light, a God of light, and a God of the dark and the destruction. And so a lot of those teachings got kind of pushed together in Christianity. I don't know that I would accuse the Roman emperors of being really concerned about theology so much as they were trying to tamp down the religious riots from the time where different religions were fighting against each other. Does it sound familiar? I mean, we have that today where we have the Muslims, the Jews, and the Christians all fighting. You throw in the Muslims fighting the Buddhists in Asia. There's constant conflict between the religions. Well, the Roman emperors had to deal with the same thing. They were trying to tamp down the conflicts. And so they were really trying to come up with one agreed upon religion that everybody had to believe in. So we were going to stop all of these religious riots that were tearing apart the empire. And so it was really under that idea and concept that the Roman emperors started controlling theology. I mean, ask yourself today why we have religious holidays like Christmas and Easter. Why you have Christmas, it falls close, it was originally on the winter solstice, and I don't think that there are any scholars who actually believe it was the date that Jesus was born. They simply took a pagan Roman holiday and converted it into a Christian holiday, said this is the day we're going to celebrate the birth of Jesus. And it's kind of like the way we do with President's Day here in this country. Here in the U.S., where it used to be George Washington's birthday, and then they decided, well, Jefferson's birthday should be a holiday. Well, what about this president? So they finally just called it President's Day. We're going to call it President's Day, and we'll celebrate all of the presidents. It doesn't matter whether it's their birthday or not. They do the same thing in England. The Queen of England, her birthday falls in the winter, and it's always bad weather, so they've moved the celebration of her birthday to the spring when they can have parades and have much nicer weather. So you have the same concept here going on back in Roman times, where they're trying to come up with one basic theology to kind of keep down the religious riots and control the populace. And one of these beliefs was hell. There are 4 words in the Bible that get translated as hell, and none of them mean anything remotely like what our modern concept of hell is, or even what the Roman concept of hell was, a place of eternal banishment where you're sent there and then once there, always there, and you have great suffering and pain. But the problem is there's no such word in the original languages of the Bible. In the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures, the term that gets translated is Sheol. And Sheol, it's in English, they transliterate it and spell it as S-H-O-E-L, S-H-E-O-L, Sheol. And Sheol in Hebrew means the grave, the pit, death, and the land of the dead, where the dead go. In Judaism, there's no real theology on what happens in the afterlife. In fact, you can talk to any rabbi you like, and if you talk to a dozen rabbis, you'll get 13 different opinions about the afterlife, because a couple of them will have multiple opinions about the afterlife. Sheol simply means it's where everybody goes. There are scriptures that say that all of the prophets and all of the, Abraham and Isaac and all of the greats of Judaism are all in Sheol. Well, in English, we've been told that Sheol translated into English as hell, but in some circumstances, based on theology. So they translated, especially in the King James Version, based on their beliefs about what the scriptures should mean. So here you have a word that doesn't mean hell, where all of the patriarchs, all of the greats of Judaism go to Sheol. Well, they translate it selectively as, hell in some places is the grave in others and the pit in others. That's in the Old Testament. In fact, if you look at your New American Standard Bible, what you'll discover is that Bible chooses not to translate the word Sheol as hell, but just transliterates it, and it uses the word Sheol in all the Old Testament. But many people get the mistaken idea, because of this without research, that Sheol simply means hell, when it really doesn't. In the New Testament, the most common word is Hades. And Hades is a Greek word. The original scriptures, the oldest existing copy of the New Testament, all come from Greek texts. And in Greek, in ancient Greek, Hades was the realm of the dead. All of the dead go to Hades. Not some, not a few, but everyone. It's the land of the dead. It's where all of the dead go. And in later Greek mythology, Hades itself gets divided up into different realms within itself. Some where the good go, some where the bad go, and some where the indifferent. They were neither good nor bad go to their own realm. But that's never divided up in the New Testament. When the term Hades is used, it's simply the common understanding at the time when Jesus spoke, the word simply meant the land of the dead. Everybody went to Hades. And the truth is, Jesus didn't speak Greek. There's no scholars that think he actually spoke Greek. Most scholars believe that he spoke Aramaic, which is very, very close to Hebrew. So likely the term he used was either Sheol or something very, very close to Sheol, with the same concepts as it had in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Scriptures. The next phrase that Jesus likely used, that gets translated in the Bible, is Gehenna. And Gehenna is actually a literal place on earth. Gehenna is the Greek transliteration of a Hebrew phrase, Geh Ben Hinnom. And Geh Ben Hinnom literally means the valley of the sons of Hinnom. And that valley is on the outskirts of the old wall in Jerusalem. It's literally was a garbage dump and a burial ground outside the ancient walls of Jerusalem. And it's a valley with a very, very nasty history. In a time in which the Jews had fallen away from the worship of the one true God, they had fallen into the worship of a god from another culture called Moloch. And they had built an altar and was called an Ashtaroth in the valley on the outskirts of town in Jerusalem, where they were sacrificing their firstborn children. They literally had an iron statue of the god Moloch that was hollow inside, and they would build a fire inside the statue until it was red hot, and then they would place the firstborn child on these hands, and it would burn it to death. And in fact, there are some secular sources, i.e. not in the Bible, but from historians, secular historians, that said that the drums beat constantly that they might drown out the screams of the children, that the hearts of the fathers might not be turned. So here you have this child sacrifice going on in the valley of Hinnom, Geh Ben Hinnom, or Gehenna. And the good King Josiah comes along and discovers the temple and discovers, to God and the ancient scriptures, the teachings of God, and restores the religion, the worship of the one true God. And he abolishes this worship of the god Moloch. And so he wanted to make sure that no one would ever worship the god Moloch again in Israel. So he tore down the statue, he tore down the temples, and he desecrated the area. And so to desecrate it, he turned it into a garbage dump and a burial ground. And so by the time Jesus comes along, this garbage dump and burial ground, they are literally, the fires burn constantly to burn the garbage in Gehenna from the city of Jerusalem. Well, this gets translated as the fires burn eternally. I don't know about you, but if the fires and the garbage dump in my town to destroy the garbage, if we were going to translate that into English, I don't think I'd use the term eternally. In fact, the phrase eternal, without beginning, without end, was not even a concept in that day and age, in the time of Jesus. It's a much later concept. It'd be kind of like if somebody uses the term internet and claims they read the word internet in a book written in the 1800s, you know they're full of it, because that word didn't exist in that day and age. Well, the concept of eternity really didn't exist in the time of Jesus' day and age. There was a beginning and an end to everything. The Bible talks about an Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. And so it's under this type of thing that Jesus is talking about Gehenna. And so here they are, they're burning the garbage out on the outskirts, and Jesus is talking, don't live your life such that, when you die, they're not going to give you a proper burial, they're just going to pitch you into the fires of Gehenna. And that's a cultural issue. You have to understand that a good Jew wants to be buried bodily. You'll never find Jews, practicing religious Jews, who at death want to be cremated. It goes back to the old scriptures where one of the prophets is talking about the flesh being restored to the bones in the final days. And so they want to have bones there so the flesh can be restored to them. So culturally, it's anathema for a Jew in Jesus' day to be pitched into the fires. Well, what were happening was they were taking the bodies of executed criminals and the abject poor, and instead of spending the money and the time and the effort to give them a proper burial, they were just pitching the bodies into the fires to get rid of them. So Jesus is saying, don't live your life such that when you die, nobody cares about you, and they just pitch your body into the fires of Gehenna. Well, this gets translated by the Catholic Church, by the Roman Church, as get being thrown bodily into the eternal fires of hell. Well, that's a pretty vivid translation if you get into it. So those are the three most common words that get translated from either the Greek or the Hebrew into English as hell. The final word that gets translated into hell is Tartarus. And that only appears once, and that's in the book of 2 Peter. But many scholars don't believe this 2 Peter, modern scholars anyway, was actually written by Peter, or that was written in the first century after Jesus' death, because there are some words that appear in 2 Peter that didn't exist in Jesus' day. And Tartarus is a concept from later Greek mythology. Tartarus is actually a place underneath Hades, where the gods, the Olympic gods, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, locked up their predecessor gods underneath the Hades, so Hades could keep them under control. And so it was a place called Tartarus. Well, in 2 Peter, it describes Tartarus as a place where God doesn't even send men, but sends angels who have fallen away. So Tartarus, even though it gets translated into English as hell, really doesn't even apply to human beings, even in the bad translations. So those are the things that get translated as hell that don't mean anything remotely like hell. When you get into it and do the research, what you'll discover is that the meanings of these words do not mean hell. It's the land where everybody goes. In Sheol and in Hades, it really is, it's the unknown, unseen realm. We all are just no longer here on earth. The physical body is left behind, but the spirit or the soul or whatever it was, that life force that was in the body is now gone, and it's gone someplace else where we cannot see it, where we do not know it exists. But it's not hell. And in fact, near-death experiences, even those that are hellish, describe different levels where there is anxiety and negative emotions and all of this sort of stuff. But it's not a permanent place. As people grow and evolve spiritually, they rise up. And in fact, near-death experiences describe everything as a vibration, that all of our energy is a vibration, that the strongest and most powerful vibration is love. And it's a very fast vibration, a very high vibration. Well, anger and resentment are very low vibrations. And so when you die, depending on whether you were loving and kind, whatever your vibration was, if you had a high vibration and you were filled with love, you'll go to realms that are surrounded with similar vibrations. And if you had a very negative vibration when you were here, very angry and resentful, then when you die, you'll simply go to an area where other people are like you. Birds of a feather flock together. But there's nothing in any of the near-death experiences that describe that you're once there, always there. And in fact, it's very much the other way around, where it says that over time, as you grow and evolve, you can progress even in heaven from a lower state to a higher state. And when you get into the Revelation, book of Revelation, when it does talk about Hades or hell, or English translation hell, is eventually at the end it talks about a hell emptied of all souls is cast into the lake of fire. It's not the souls that are cast into the lake of fire, it's hell itself, this negative realm that might exist on the other side in death, that itself is destroyed. When we're all have raised our vibration, when we're all filled with the love and understanding of the truth of who God is and who you are, and that you're a part of that God. And so these are the things that I discovered in my research. And so I encourage people to look up the definitions. And I thought it was fascinating that even some of the religious texts, religious books that are out there, like Strong's Concordance, which is a concordance used for the Bible, when you pull up the actual word, Gehenna, Hades, and all these sorts of things, it will tell you that you have to read it carefully, but what you'll discover is that even in that case, it does not describe a hell that's eternal. It's very, very clear that the word's meaning is nothing like our current English translation of hell. And so for many years, I was, especially as a child, terrified of going to hell. And well, I'm finally starting to understand when Jesus was talking about the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of God is at hand. It's right here. It's right now. Well, hell is right here, right now, too. It's hell in this life. When you're filled with negative emotions and your life is going in the wrong direction, that's hell. It's not a place you're going to go to when you die. It's right here, right now. So the question becomes is what kind of life do you want to live right now? And so knowing that the kingdom of heaven is at hand, that God is all around you, there's nothing but God anywhere around you, is the key to understanding this, that you're a part of God, that your Father loves you, God loves you dearly, but has given you this opportunity to come down here and experience whatever it is that you want to experience and to learn by the experience. But when you die, you're going back to God from which you came. And so we'll talk about some other things that describe that. Jesus actually said, what if you saw the Son of Man coming, descending from where he came before? And I'll give you a little teaser. We'll talk about it in the next episode. But the Son of Man is not a reference to Jesus. It's actually a metaphor or an idiom. And it means all of mankind. So come back to our next episode and we'll talk about the Son of Man and the meanings there. And I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Thanks and have a good day.